You don't have blank here, do you? Not with that attitude, I don't. What can I get you? Drunk? Welcome to episode 12 of Behind Bars, Cocktails, and Wasted Nights. I'm your host, Greg. 12? What in the actual F? Unreal. Anyways, I've been working as a bartender for over 20 years, and over those years, I've seen a lot. My goal here is to share some of those high and low lights with you. Quick warning, this podcast contains sex, drugs, and some language that isn't suitable for anyone under 21 years of age, so you gotta have some ID. Correction Corner. In the last episode, I said there were 5 contestants on Dog Eat Dog. There were 6. Hence the $5,000 apiece for 5 players in the dog pound on a $25,000 prize. Sorry. Also, I stated that I couldn't find the tiles that bore the correct answers to trivia questions. In 2 cases, I honestly didn't even know the correct answers, and that's as honest as I'll let myself be. So there. That episode was so traumatic for me I had to take last week off. This is why I don't understand therapy. You dig up all this painful stuff and talk about it, and it only makes you feel worse. I'm going to start a practice where patients come in and discuss Disney, tits, and blow, and I bet they'll all leave in a fucking joyous state of mind. I'll crush it. But it's still early in the podcast, and I digress. Okay, before we get started, you'll need a drink. For this one, I recommend the Dr. Funk. This is a tiki drink created by Dr. Bernhard Funk, who was author Robert Louis Stevenson's physician and friend. In a shaker tin, combine 1.5 ounces of white rum, I recommend Bacardi, a teaspoon of absinthe, 1/2 ounce of grenadine, 3/4 fresh lime juice, and shake. Strain all that into a tiki mug filled with ice, topped with 1 ounce of soda water, garnish with a lime wheel and umbrella, and enjoy. If you don't have any of that, go with a shot of El Jimador and a key bump. Actually, 2 key bumps for this one. Okay, on with the story. It was 2009 and the entire economy was still collapsing all around us. Sales were down, tips were down, hell, people were down. As much as I was sick of making drinks at Jack's, that jazz bar in Glendale, which you may remember from episode 6, the night a guest said I roofied her, I was lucky to be working, which is why it sucked so bad when I got fired. We had a new manager brought in, Sue. She was obviously there to trim the fat, and usually when the new regime comes in, they like to cut off the head of the old beast, and the head of the old beast is usually those with seniority, and since the daytime bartender left to sell wine, I was the head. I had 3 bar years under my belt, which is like 9 regular years at a grown-up job. Sue was a short, squat cunt. She had these torpedo tits, the triangular kind that Madonna wore as a weird fashion statement, but in this case, these were her actual boobs. They pushed out her sweater like jetties in the water, like a comical gravity-defying shelving unit. She must have tripped a lot, because there was no way she had lower peripheral vision. She wasn't attractive, and you could tell it just wasn't middle-aged and she'd hit the wall. She was never attractive, and she clearly had a chip on her tiny shoulder about it, but the implants weren't helping. Anyways, once she saw my rapport with the regulars, the way they laughed at my one-liners, the way their 2-ounce pours were closer to 4, and my smiling face, she might as well have pointed a laser sight at my forehead from her Terminator eyes. I was already done for. Her first order of business was to step up our game, maximize sales, upsell, upsell, upsell. I hate when this happens. You can't change regulars' habits. When you overhaul a restaurant, you don't just switch out staff, you switch out the crowd. This is done by taking away their comfort zone, their used-tos. All the way from the pours they're used to the staff they're used to pouring for them. You gotta free up that real estate for the younger, richer buyers. Step 1, a wine class for pairing. No longer would we just sell dinners and desserts. We'd sell dinner and dessert with matching glasses of wine. Sure, my functioning alcoholics were gonna love this. I already knew I was toast. This wasn't a self-fulfilling prophecy. This was actual, oh shit, nervous stomach, I'm dead with this new chick survival instinct. If I were a caveman, I would have recognized this saber tooth and ran upon laying sight, but since we lived in a civilized society, I had to punch in and work till the cat pounced, but the writing was on the wall. Where was I? Oh yeah, the wine class. If you've listened to previous episodes, you know my feelings about pairing wines with food, and the bullshit spiels that pair with the wines themselves. Sure, they vary, but you have red with red meat, white with white meat, and sweet with dessert. Period. Bye. I don't need to come in at 8 a.m. for a fucking class after I got home at 3 a.m., fell asleep at 4 a.m., then got back up at 6 a.m. so I could beat traffic to get to this early-ass class only to sit in traffic to go home, nap, and fight traffic on my way back for my 4 p.m. shift. Fucking write a meeting agenda and a syllabus or some shit and email me. Fuck. So, you're getting an idea of my mood while I was in this class listening to some metrosexual douche who's never changed a keg in his life or sopped up a guest's puke with a bar towel talk to me about how this Pinot Grigio isn't as grassy as the first. It's more steely with hints of grapefruit. Steely? Is this guy out there sucking off car bumpers? Fuck this. I shit you not, this ass clown actually demonstrated eating peach cobbler and gulping down a frizzante wine. Yes, frizzante, meaning effervescent, because frizzante is much more pretentious and proper than fizzy. He actually chewed the cobbler, swallowed, then chased it down with the wine and said, and I quote, "As you let the wine play on your palate, you can feel the bubbles working to get you ready for that next bite." Jesus Christ. You would have been able to hear my eyes roll if I hadn't audibly groaned. I rolled up my meeting agenda. They could have emailed me and settled in for some shut-eye as Sue fumed looking at me. Firing secure. Fuck this bitch and her new regime. This guy was getting paid for this shit? How much did this class cost? I probably could have made the bar twice this amount in half the time, once you figured in labor costs for the employees to be there for this illusory garbage and the metrosexuals fee. Talk about the emperor's new clothes. I wasn't drinking the Kool-Aid. Actually, Jim Jones served Flavor Aid, the generic brand, but I digress. That night would be the night I got the guillotine. So a little context on function, how I actually handle money while working. When you buy a drink for $11 and give me $15 and tell me to keep the change, I keep the overage in the drawer. Why? Well, number one, it's stupid to count out the $4 in ones, put them in a tip jar that I only have to count again at the end of the night. Number two, you run out of ones that way, and there's never a manager around to get more ones when you need. Number three, you save even more time when you count the drawer at the end. There's your bank, cash owed to the house, and whatever is left over are your tips that you can take in big bills first, so you don't have to recount, cash in, or show up at a bank like a male stripper with 200 in singles. This is basically how I've worked every bar in my life, including where I work now. Sue didn't like this. She was from the Blind Drop School of Management, where you're taught that your bartender is always stealing from you. Sure, bartenders steal, but no one's smart enough to keep track of stolen cash while you're juggling 12 things at once for 8 hours and drunk. The theft is in the heavy pours, which isn't even theft, it's incentive for the guests to return. Anyway, she blind dropped me. This means she took my drawer mid-shift and supplied me with a new one. If my original drawer was off by $20, short or over, I'd be written up. I protested that of course it would be over. I've been putting my tips in there. I always did. Besides, how did I know where I stood, as I didn't even know what the new drawer had for a bank? Why would I trust management not to steal from me? This was all a setup to get rid of me, and I knew it. So, it was time to steal big for my last night. I was seething with rage, so every time a guest or a regular started getting cash together for an order, I hit no sale and dropped all the money into my tip jar. Credit card sales only from there on out. I netted about 3 bills the next 4 hours, and when it came time to get my write-up at the end of my shift, I asked for my tips, the overage in the first drawer. She said I could get them after she fully audited the register. I told Sue that was fine, and proceeded to take 2 bottles of Don Julio 1942 and 2 bottles of Hennessy VSOP off the storage shelf and let her know that she could have those back once I got my tips and stormed off. I know, I'm a child. But still, it was pretty epic, and I'm not ashamed. Besides, I'd already kicked my retaliatory strategy into gear that afternoon. See, when you work in a bar, labor laws are seldom followed when it comes to breaks. Most of the time, you bartend alone, and you never get your 15-minute or half-hour break in an 8 or 9-hour shift. You serve everyone drinks, you get caught up and run in the back to house quesadillas over the trash can for your meal. The move is to add up all your shifts, then tally the break time you were never given or paid for, then go to the Department of Labor and sue for a settlement after you've threatened to get all the other former employees on board for a class action. It was poetic justice that this bitch's name was Sue. So, I went in for my next shift, which was basically walking into a buzzsaw. This is the other classy thing about the service industry. They rarely fire you on the spot. They like to stay quiet, let you shower, get ready, not make any plans, and fire you the moment you walk in. Luckily, I already knew the hammer was coming, so I made plans with some friends, got drunk ahead of time, and headed in with the 4 bottles of expensive booze. Torpedo Tits handed me an envelope of cash, a pink slip, and I handed her the bottles and my letter of intent to sue with fake signatures of former disgruntled employees willing to be named on the case. After I added everything up, I figured that over 3 years, I was owed just over $4,000 in unpaid meal breaks, so I let them put that in their pipe and smoke it. After some back and forth, I was handed a check for $6,200 and signed something that said I wouldn't pursue further legal action, nor would I ever enter any of the 4 restaurants owned by the group, which was fine with me. They all went out of business years later. Karma's a bitch. Now, in a free-falling economy, $6,200 doesn't get you very far in LA. With rent, phone, food, car payment, insurance, lifestyle choices, etc., it got me through a very fun 3 months. But I needed to get a job, and that was proving to be impossible. Every time I heard about an opening, I got my resume together and headed out, only to find that more often than not, there was a line that looked like American Idol was holding auditions. I'm not exaggerating. This was depressing as fuck because you realize how profoundly superficial the LA service industry really is. Every place would herd the cattle into 2 lines. I quickly learned where I stood in the world of attraction because I always found that one line was full of impossibly good-looking people, and I was in the line behind the fat girl with the goatee. Our line always moved faster, as the guy interviewing the pretty line was laughing and flirting with the wannabe starlet, as the interviewer in my line was rubber-stamping resumes without headshots and saying, "We'll call you. Next." I wish I could say this happened at one bar. This was not the case. It happened everywhere I applied. Before long, I was eating ramen and counting change out of my jar for gas and parking meters while I made my rounds applying for work. Soon, the inevitable came. The gigs section on Craigslist. And soon, my desperation supplanted my shame. I applied for and got gigs that were so weird, I didn't think anyone would believe it, so I started secretly recording the entire process of securing these low-paying one-offs to put on YouTube, which I eventually sold as a web series to an online production company called Big TV. I'm pretty sure you can still find The Unemployment Chronicles on YouTube, but due to their relatively new inappropriate content filters, the best one isn't there. But we'll get to that one soon, I promise. I started off with the obvious stuff. I applied to be a test subject for a new antidepressant. I can't remember its name, but it sounded like Effexor or one of those that you couldn't be sure was a medication or a transformer. The thing's side effects included hot flushes, not flashes, seizures, internal bleeding, hair loss, male titties with lactation, loss of vision, and all the other shit you see on TV. I applied anyway, but due to the fact that I've had seizures in the past, I didn't even qualify. Male titties with milk. I was willing to take that chance. That's how broke I was, and I didn't even qualify? Fuck. Things were getting hard out there for a pimp. Next medical one I got was my second favorite gig of all time. A doctor at UCLA was doing a study on addiction and how it related to ex-smokers. I had quit smoking for 3 years and was all in. Now, to be honest, I was floating by on the kindness of this bartender at this disgusting dive bar around the corner from the apartment I was barely hanging on to. She would let me drink and give me $20 here and there. Total angel. She actually dated Danny Elfman years and years earlier, and the animated character of Sally in The Nightmare Before Christmas was based on her. Looked just like her. That's neither here nor there, but it's a pretty cool detail, I feel. Any hoozlebees. Back to the study. For $50 a pop, I was to understudy the main subject. I would show up, get $50, then go home while they tested the main guy. This went on for 3 weeks. During these 3 weeks, I would go to the Barrel on Van Nuys in Sherman Oaks to drink and get a handout from the angel Sally. One night, I was pissing and the guy in the stall next to me asked if I wanted some cocaine. I know, this is the dumbest question ever asked in the English language. I ducked into the stall, straddled the toilet like a motorcycle, and did some generous and unsanitary rails off the tank's lid. After a few rounds of that, I found myself outside smoking weed with some other regulars who'd come to know me in my dire circumstances and included me in whatever debauchery they had cooking up. Finally, a pill pusher gave me a Vicodin, and it was time to go home. I had to show up for my addiction study bright and early. Living in the Hollywood pills, people. Cut to 8 a.m. at UCLA. I showed up, rode hard, and put away wet to get my $50 and go home and go back to sleep. Turns out, the main subject couldn't make it, so I had to be the guy. Fuck. This was a 4-hour process in which they'd inject a radioactive dye into me, then sit me in an MRI and map the areas of the brain responsible for drug addiction and try to comprehend how I quit smoking. But I was all for it because now I'd be paid $100. I just had to take a piss test first. This was going to be hilarious, I thought. I filled the cup and handed it to the medical assistant. Minutes, and I mean minutes later, he showed up. "Greg, can I talk to you for a second?" he asked. "Sure, what's up?" You tested positive for alcohol?" "Yeah, I had a couple drinks last night." This doesn't affect the $100, does it? I asked, genuinely concerned. No, he said, but we also found marijuana. I knew it took weeks for weed to leave the system, so I said, yeah, I had an edible about 2 weeks ago. No smoke in these lungs, I assured. And the opiates? He asked. Again, those take a while to push through, so I made up some shit about a dentist appointment a month ago I knew they wouldn't